I said back at the beginning of the year this was going to be an interesting year. We're going to see an event and we're going to see some big changes this year, and we're certainly seeing them roll out pretty much as quick as they can muster. Another thing you've heard me talk about for a couple of years now, sort of ringing the warning bells about, is 5G and the smart cities, the smart system, the IoT, all the stuff that they're rolling out around us, the surveillance grid that they want to put in place as well. I've been informing you about the system they put in place in China, the social credit system, the mass surveillance that's going with it, and I've been suggesting to you that this is very likely a test case and a trial model that they intend to roll out around the rest of the world. Well, here in Australia, we have the city of Darwin in the Northern Territory, and Darwin Council has just announced that Darwin will be the first smart city in Australia, and it is moving towards a smart future based on the Chinese surveillance system that they put in place in their cities. The Chinese version of the smart cities is what they've already said. That's what they're doing. They're creating a system which will be able to track all of the residents of Darwin, and they're openly admitting this. This is what they're doing. And they're saying that the system will enable them to be able to put up virtual fences in Darwin. So what is a virtual fence would be the question. Do they talk about an active denial zone that people can't walk through because I'll get an electric shock walking between two posts? Well, I doubt that's what they're going to do. So what is the terminology? A virtual fence. Well, what does a fence do? A fence limits you from going places. It limits your access to things. So what they're talking about, folks, if you read between the lines, is a social credit system. This is the virtual fence they're talking about. If you step outside the lines and you get below social credit points, you will be limited from accessing certain areas. This is how they're doing it, folks. And of course, they're doing it in Darwin because it's a small enough city in Australia. It's kind of a capital city without being a capital city because the Northern Territory isn't really a state. And it's a small enough population but a large enough infrastructure to kind of make it a very, very good trial model. It's also a very common port between Asia and China and Australia, so it's a good place for them to trial it out, and that appears to be what they're doing. So if you think it isn't coming to a town near you, folks, well, it is. And this is something that I've been talking about, like I said, for a couple of years now, and now we see it rolling out right here under our noses in Australia. So the government certainly is going hell for leather to get this control grid in place as quickly as they can, folks. And of course, this entire system that they want to put in place, because of the enormous amount of bandwidth it's going to use to have an IoT, to enable it to work properly, to have all of these transactions and digital things going on all at once, you need an enormous amount of bandwidth. So that's what they need 5G for. Well, that's one of the reasons they want 5G in place for anyway, and it's a weapons system, it's all sorts of things, but the thing is you cannot run a surveillance system as complex as the one they're putting in place and the IoT without something that provides the type of bandwidth that you're going to get from 5G. So it is essential for them to be able to put the 5G system in place in order for them to be able to roll out the IoT and the social credit system on top of it. But bearing that in mind, we're actually having a great deal of success in combating the rollout of 5G in some communities here in Australia. And that's a good thing as well, which is definitely going to put a spanner in the works of this surveillance system they want to roll out. But we need to get enough people involved in combating 5G in order to stop this happening. Because once it gets a foothold, if it gets a foothold in Darwin, it's going to roll out to the rest of the country anyway, unless we can completely stop the rollout of this 5G technology. And as I said, folks, we're actually having a little bit of success in doing this. Quite synchronistically, I went to a 5G meeting in the valley that I live in last weekend, and at that meeting there was a barrister who came to the meeting. This guy's from Tasmania, and he's launched action in a town near here called Nimbin, and he's also launched action in Sydney. And he's stopped the rollout of 5G in all of the actions that he's launched. And what he's doing is he's using the criminal code of each state and how the Australian Criminal Code defines assault, what constitutes an assault under the criminal code of each state. And he's pointed out that an assault actually constitutes a threat against you that causes you to not be living your life in a state of quiet enjoyment. I mean, everybody is entitled to quiet enjoyment in the comfort of their own home. And if someone is threatening you or disturbing your quiet enjoyment in any way, then that constitutes an assault against you under the Queensland Criminal Code, under the state criminal codes of pretty well all our states here in Australia. And you'll probably find it's the same in the United States as well. You'll find you've got a criminal code for your state, Arizona, California, wherever you happen to be. There'll be a criminal code for that state. Have a look at the criminal code and find out what constitutes an assault. And you'll find out that it is anything that disturbs the quiet enjoyment that you are allowed to live your life in the comfort of your own home. If you therefore go to a medical doctor and you get a medical doctor's opinion of what the damages are from exposure to electromagnetic radiation, and the medical doctor is able to confirm you that it is dangerous for human beings to be exposed to electromagnetic radiation, then you now have the ammunition you need to take to the telco company or to the local government representatives and inform them that there is an assault being carried out against your person because you are sitting in your house in a constant state of fear due to this electromagnetic tower and this electromagnetic bombardment that is being forced upon you against your will. This constitutes an assault under the criminal code of your state, and you demand that this assault against you be stopped immediately. And that's what we've done in Australia, and we've actually had an enormous amount of success taking this approach. And we're encouraging other communities to do the same. I'm actually going to try to get this barrister to come onto the show in the next couple of weeks so he can explain it to you properly without me messing up any details that I may be messing up. And just to attempt to explain the enormous simplicity of this approach to people, because it is so simple that it's actually quite beautiful in its simplicity. And when you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. And also it's great in as much as it's using the criminal system, it's using the criminal code and the legal system against the people who are attempting to use the system against us. You know, they're attempting to tell us that we can't do anything about this 5G rollout because it's legislated that it will happen. Well, if that legislation is in breach of the criminal code, then that legislation is void and defunct by default. And if the politicians want to push that, you'll probably find that you can even prosecute them under breaches of the criminal code, because what they are doing, if they want to push the matter, you'll find it's their own actions that is also constituting an assault against the people. And this is simply not permitted. It's not what you're allowed to do. You can't assault people, and that's what these telco companies are doing. That's what 5G is doing, and that's essentially what Trump is doing by forcing this rollout out as quickly as he is attempting to do in the United States. He is virtually assaulting all the people of his country with 5G technology. But you'll find that you do have a criminal code in whatever state you happen to be in, folks, and if you bring a medical doctor into it, as I said, and get them to outline damages of electromagnetic radiation, and you've just proved an assault against your person, and you just have acquired all the tools you need to take legal action against whatever telco company is rolling this stuff out. So that's something to think about. And as I said, folks, we're having an enormous amount of success with this in Australia, which means that everybody in Canada would also be able to do this, because this is the Westminster legal system, which would also mean that everybody in England will very likely find they can do the same thing. So if you're living in the UK and they're rolling out 5G in your neighbourhood, have a look at what the criminal code in the UK is, and then go and get yourself a medical certificate and start taking some action. And just inform these telco companies that if they don't cease and desist this assault against your person, you will press charges against them under the criminal code of your country. You know, and even thinking about how I just explained that to you, I'm sure that there'd be a way through this in pretty well every country on earth that isn't an open dictatorship. I mean, perhaps this isn't going to work if you're living in North Korea or something, but if you happen to be living in the United States or any country in Europe, I'm sure you have a basic criminal code which prevents assault against people in your country. And all you have to do, as I said, is look up and find what constitutes an assault. And you'll find that it doesn't necessarily need to be a physical assault. If you are not able to live your life in quiet enjoyment because of a threat that you perceive is being carried out against you, it's the same as having someone next door playing loud music 24 hours a day and you can't sleep or do anything. This is an assault against you. It's the same if you have an electromagnetic tower there, which is putting a frequency against you, which is causing harm. Now, the problem is that we get scientific reports and we get all of the scientific data and all the stuff the scientists say to point out the fact that this is dangerous, but there's no medical opinion involved in it. And scientists are not medical doctors, and what we're talking about is our threat to our health that's coming from these things. So if you get a medical opinion, then that far outweighs a scientific opinion when it is talking about the effects on human biology. So that gives you the tools you need to show that there is, in fact, an assault being waged against you. It's a constant assault, and it's something that you want rectified. And you're going to find that you've got a criminal code in pretty well every country on earth which will be effective in dealing with this issue, as long as you get a medical report and go about it in that way. So that's something that I think people should be looking at in all their countries. Just have a look at your criminal code, find out what constitutes an assault, and then go to a doctor and talk to them about the dangers of electromagnetic radiation and get them to write you out a report or an affidavit or whatever, a doctor's statement, identifying that these dangers are real. And as I said, that's pretty well all the ammunition you need to identify the fact that an assault is being carried out against you, and the government has no other option than to do something about that, and the telco company has no other option than to cease and desist the assault immediately. That's the thing, you see, folks. No matter how negative they make it, no matter how much they try to hold us back, there's always a way out. There's always a doorway somewhere that we can squeeze open if we try hard enough. And a lot of the beauty of this is that they're in such fear now, and they're rolling everything out so quickly that it's causing a lot of people to notice things. People who wouldn't normally notice these types of things. Something that I noticed at the 5G meeting, or the 5G meeting that I went to in the Valley the other day, was the variety of people there. There were hippies, there were housewives, there were farmers, there were barristers. There were all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, all there together, all sharing the same concerns and all sharing with each other and supporting each other in a common cause. And that was a beautiful thing to see. So there is a lot of the community coming together. It's getting to the point that people's backs are getting to the wall. A lot of the stuff that I've said for years, people won't notice this until it comes to their own backyard. Well, 5G is kind of bringing it to their own backyard, because there's a lot of information being spread about this now. A lot of people have been putting out documentaries. A lot of people have been releasing information about this for a few years now, and it's getting to more and more people. A lot of people have trouble with the vaccine issues or their belief systems about whatever, but 5G is one that really does seem to be reaching people, because a lot of people have fear of electromagnetism. A lot of people don't like the whole concept of the smart grid and the smart cities.